Hello, everybody, and welcome to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. I'm here, as always, with my co-pilot and producer, Dan the Man. Say hello, Dan.
How's it going, everybody?
Hey. Welcome back. We're glad you're here. If this is the first time you're joining our podcast, this is a general recovery podcast. We focus at first on addictions and alcoholism and drug addiction, but we are loaded with addictions in our culture that every person has to navigate, even if it's just your cell phone or Netflix or Cheetos. We will try to address all those in our journey doing this podcast. We've had a great time so far, great topics. I believe the doctor's opinion from the AA Big Book came out this week. Next week, before this podcast, you should be able to get the one on your passions and what do you love to do most in the world. I hope that's very helpful for you. And then today we have a good topic for you. And the way this podcast is formatted, we'll have a discussion period where I'll talk about a topic, bring it up, do my edumacation as I call it. And then Dan will share his 2 bits on it. And then we've got a question and answer period, which we do invite you to send questions to us free of charge, completely anonymously at the I Am 1-2 recovery at gmail.com. That's the email address, I Am 1-2 recovery at gmail.com. And we please welcome your questions, anything at all, anything if you're struggling with in life, if I can offer some life experience, or check with other people that I know, like my sponsor or my sponsor's sponsor. That's kind of how this deal works. We have this vast network of people that if you have any problem in the world, whether it's a plumbing problem, a psychological problem, a child problem, whatever it is, we can usually find someone who has direct experience with what you're going through, which is so valuable in life. Please develop a fellowship around you. I mean, literally, if I got legal charges tonight, God forbid, I know people to call. And I know they'll tell me what to do to navigate that best. So thank God for other people. And, you know, people always say that term, God works through people, but it's interesting how isolated we are as a culture. We don't really have as many friends and close people in our lives. But if you're in recovery, come join us. You will definitely have a family to lean on. For those of you that have just joining us too, I am a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor with a master's degree in social work, with an emphasis of addiction studies. I've had 21 years in professional practice, and I've had 40 years of recovery that I just celebrated last week. And we're going to celebrate at the end of the month. Thank you, Dan. It's truly phenomenal to me. I don't know how I ended up here. I was joking with another old timer who just celebrated his 20 years this past month. We both said, he even heard this in Vegas where he grew up in his sobriety. You just get there by don't drink and don't die. So here we are. So hopefully both of those will continue and we can continue this journey on the podcast. So let's get right to today's topic. This is going to be a topic that dovetails into next week's topic. So I really don't think you can talk about the first step of any type of recovery, not just drugs and alcohol, but the approach that works to best for change, without talking about all 3 steps. Because Bill Wilson, if you don't know, was a stockbroker, and he used to do contracts, and he was very good at legalese. And the way he sets out the first 3 steps, it's a very ironclad process for a person to make a decision, to give into that decision, and to then make a commitment to do the work of the program. Another reason why we have a first step is because if we had alcoholic and drunks coming into the room, drug addicts, and we said, okay, get right to work on your 4th step, none of them would be prepared for that. Plus their brain is Swiss cheese from the damage of the chemicals. So this 3-step process gives them a chance to evaluate, come to some meetings, see if they like what they see, and then make up their own mind that they're going to commit and do the work to get well. So it's genius in my opinion. So today we will deal with steps 1 and 2, and then next week we'll get all into your favorite step 3, which we call the God stuff. So it's the source of terror for most people, and I'm going to clear a lot of that up for you. Please join us for this one after this. This will help you more than almost anything else I have to share. I'm passionate about this topic of taking your God back from the people that stole it from you, but that's just a teaser for next week. So why do we have a first step? Well, let me break it down with a little bit of history. Everything comes from somewhere, so I always like to give a little background on, where these ideas originate and why does this approach work. For centuries, since the dawn of time, we have had a reputation with addicts and alcoholics that they are weak-minded, that they are immoral, that they just don't have any willpower. And it's actually the exact opposite. That's the first thing I try to teach my patients when they first come into my room. I'll give you an example. If I have a dad that comes to me for counseling and his daughter has been using drugs for 20 years, and he has been trying during that entire 20 years to get his daughter off pills, and he's been saying things to her like, you just need to get a job, or you just need to pull your shit together, or you just need to go to church and reconnect with God. And they're still not sober. I have to pause that man at a certain point in his ranting, and he is furious. He's pulling his hair out, upset as he's telling me this, and say, so let me ask you a question. How long have you been trying to get your daughter to stop? 20 years. I've been yelling at her, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, apparently it hasn't worked. She's winning that battle with you. Of the battle of wills, her willpower is winning. She's still using, is she not? And he goes, yeah. I said, so we got to change some tactics here, man. And that's the problem. That approach of telling us that I can control it. That is the very worst advice you can give to any alcoholic. And people say it in the most strange ways. They'll say things like, well, why can't you drink like a normal person? Why don't you just have one or two like we do? And you're giving the alcoholic permission to take the first drink, which is going to set off that terrible phenomenon of craving we talked about a few weeks ago, and they're going to lose control. And then, to add insult to injury, the normal people will say to the alcoholic, I just don't understand what's wrong. Why do you do that? They're basically saying you're different. And that's the whole core of the thing, is we have a different reaction to the substance. So if you tell me as an alcoholic, and I also have this strange mind, we talked about that on the Isms podcast. If you tell me I can quit anytime I want, my first thought is, well, why do it tonight? I can still slip in one more night. If I can quit anytime I want, what is the rush? I mean, we just had Derby here, so I could have held up till after Derby's over. Maybe I get sober. But now I'd be like, well, the holidays, and then fall and football and, the Super Bowl and maybe New Year's, I'll quit then. Do not ever tell an alcoholic that they have a power of choice, because they will use that choice and never stop. It does not work. So into this picture comes Bill Wilson, who's looking at that landscape of lack of success. And he's looking at all the treatment centers he's been to. They weren't called treatment centers. They were called asylums. And they would just lock you up in there and let you shake it off. And then they'd lecture you about morality and going to church and kick you loose. And you were drunk that night. It's not working. So just from a pure scientific standpoint, why don't we try something else? One of my favorite speakers in the program has this wonderful story. He says, if you encounter any wall in your life and you keep bashing your brains against it so they're falling out of your head onto the ground in a bloody mess, but you're not quitting, you're just backing up and taking a harder run at that wall every time and the wall is not budging, how about this? Turn left or turn right. But for God's sake, stop doing the same exact thing. Do something different. And that's what Bill Wilson and the boys in AA did. They figured it out. It's the exact opposite of what they've been telling us. I don't have the power to stop. I am powerless over fixing myself. Now, this is just logic. I mean, it's not that far a concept to understand. If you have heart disease, are you going to operate on yourself? Can you imagine how out of your mind ridiculous you would think it would be if you're walking down the street and you see a man lay down on the sidewalk and he starts unbuttoning his shirt and he takes out a scalpel and starts cutting his chest open, and you say, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And he goes, well, I have heart issues and I'm a heart surgeon, so I'm going to fix myself. Mm-hmm. And this is the disease of our times. It's the disease of too much internet and thinking we can DIY everything ourselves, and also the disease of the human ego, which has been with us since the dawn of time. This idea that I don't need help, I ain't doing no therapy, I don't need to go and spend money, all these excuses, why not? And meanwhile, nothing changes, it only gets worse. So Bill Wilson comes along and says, I think we're powerless. He did not know about the brain science. For those of you who were here for the addiction lecture, he had no idea that the brain was being hijacked by these processes of the mood-altering chemicals, but also the chemistry of the genetics and all that. Pardon me, I have to wet my whistle occasionally. So they applied that approach, and suddenly all these alcoholics started getting better. They stopped working on themselves, and they started looking at what the real problem was, because Bill took it further than that. He said, you're not only powerless, but I think you don't have the sufficient power on your own to fix it or to manage it or to even live life. Because in the big book, he goes on to say after that, we needed a power by which we could live. I think that's a very interesting turn of a phrase that people read over and they don't really understand what it means. But if you talk to any addict or alcoholic at length and really get them to open up, they'll tell you, yeah, I'm having a hard time dealing with this thing called life. I can't get my bills paid on time. I can't get to work. I can't fucking be a good parent to my kids. All this stuff, anxiety, depression, all this stuff. It's like, oh, so you're telling me of your own power, you're not able to navigate and manage these issues. Yes, I'm telling you that. Well, it sounds like you're going to need a power outside of yourself. If the power is not within you, it's just logic by Mr. Spock on Star Trek that it's going to be outside of you. And that power has to be obviously a power greater than yourself. It's a very logical process. Now, that greater power can come from many sources. Maybe you start out, for most of us, and we'll talk more about this later, with the group. There is way more power in a group than there is in an individual. I heard Father Martin on a Chalk Talk say one time, he said, you can take a string and you can snap it with your fingers. But if you take one string and wrap it with another and with another, suddenly you have a cable and you're able to pull in a USS aircraft carrier. So the power of people together, and that's what we have in these groups, is way more effective than the power of the person alone. So that's the first concept. I have to have a power. It's got to be a power outside myself. It can't be me. And it's got to be a power that's greater than myself. Now, this is immediately where the ego comes in. And all of us are going to have our own process with this. Before I began the podcast, I asked my friend Dan about any thoughts he had on the first step. And he really went to the heart of it, which is kind of the problem we have, why more people are not recovering. He said, it's really a mystical, I use that word, he didn't, process about how people get enough pain that they come in and they've done their first step before they even hit the rooms. They come in with a willingness, with an openness that they say, teach me. I'm ready. I don't want to live like this anymore. Now, if you translate to any problem, translate this to any problem you're having out there, whether it's using your cell phone too much, not getting enough sleep, eating a crappy diet, treating your kids badly when you lose your emotional temperament. Look at that. Look how, you try to control it, try to fix it. You don't have the control. You have to reach a bottom with that before you're willing to seek other help outside of yourself. So that's where the ego is always going to come in and say, you don't need anybody. You got this, man. You're a smart guy. Look how successful you've been in all these other areas of your life. Now, I heard a fellow on a podcast who's very successful. Some of you would recognize his picture if I showed him to you. He's a multimillionaire and he's got a lot of followers and he's incredibly in shape. Eats a perfect diet and he now helps other people to do that. And he was saying, the interviewer was asking him, so what changed in your path? Because before that, your life was a wreck. What made you turn this other direction? And he said, well, I had a counselor I was seeing and that counselor looked me in the face and said, look, you've got a great toolkit that's gotten you this far. So you can sit here and tell me that you've been a success in business, you've made all this money, you've raised your kids, all that great stuff, great. But this toolkit you currently have is not going to be sufficient to beat this hurdle. You're going to need additional tools. You are running on fumes when it comes to your old tools. You're going to need brand new tools if you're going to break through this. And he went on to say that to me, him speaking, that this is a key to being successful in life. He said, surround yourself with people that won't buy your own bullshit. They will challenge you when you say things like, I think I can fix it myself. And that's what we have in our program when you have a sponsor, is your sponsor will lovingly say, well, there's not much evidence yet that you've been able to fix it, so I'm not going to put my money on you if I was betting on you in the Kentucky Derby. So that's the first part. Can I admit, which is what the first step is all about, the honesty that I have reached my wit's end with trying to fix this myself. My dear old sponsor, Dr. Burns Brady, had a phrase that he would say to the boys down at the Healing Place. This is our men's recovery center in downtown Louisville. It's really a homeless center, but they provide treatment services. And, he'd be doing class and he knows more than anybody I've ever met, but the people don't respect it. They're throwing spitballs. They're laughing. They're cutting up. They're sleeping. And at a certain point, he lost his cool one day and he threw down his chalk and he said, you know what? You're right. And they all went, what? And they all woke up with their heads, I'm right, what? And he said, everything I'm writing on this board is academic and doesn't mean anything to you unless you haven't had your last great ass whooping yet. If you've had your last great ass whooping, maybe you'll listen and this makes sense to you. If you haven't, you're going to have to go back out, lather, rinse, repeat, and suffer some more. And we try, damn do we try as counselors to shortcut that process, that a person's suffering doesn't lead them to prison or doesn't lead you to homelessness and you're living in tent city or turning tricks on the street. It is going to lead there for most addicts and alcoholics. But if you just have a little bit of humility, brought to you courtesy of pain, wrecked enough cars, been in enough hospitals, been to jail a couple of times, lost your wife almost, had your family leave you. If you've had just enough pain, maybe you're willing to listen and let somebody else teach you something new. So I have to disabuse of my fellow of the idea that he can fix this. And I also have to be sure that he admits that he has this problem. That's the brutal honesty we have to have. If you don't admit, which is the first word, that I have an issue with cell phones, I have an issue with my Cheetos, I have an issue with sex, whatever the thing is, unless you can fully admit that you're sick and tired of being sick and tired of it, then really you're not ready for change. So when I get my newcomer in the car, I'm sponsoring somebody, the first thing I like to do at the first step is I'll sit back and I'll say, I'm not going to do the work here because I'm going to tell you as a counselor, trying to get patients to open up about their stories, about what this is doing to their lives is virtually an impossible challenge. I will literally tell them this disease is like this. It comes in your house, breaks in one day. It will beat you up, leave you bloody. It will beat up your wife as well. It might even screw your daughter in front of you. And it will steal all your fine furniture and everything you care about. And it'll kick your dog on the way out the door. Maybe even leave your house on fire. And then the cops, when they finally catch this perpetrator who's done this to you, they say, okay, now you get to come to court and you get to make your impact statement. You get to tell this person what they did to you and the impact it had on your life. You couldn't tell me that not any self-respecting addict or alcoholic wouldn't be in the front row just gnashing his teeth waiting to get in there to tell him, I'm going to tell him exactly what he did. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get him. And I ask them to share that about their disease and they all just look at me like this. And I refuse to pull teeth with an addict to tell me their truth. I will not do it. You're either ready to get well or you're not. Luckily, a lot of my other patients sharing will sometimes open them up. Oh, I relate to this, but they won't tell you the real stuff. They'll tell you some goofy, funny story. I want to hear the sad, embarrassing, mortifying stories. What mortifies you about your behavior as you drink or drug? So what I do with my newcomer is I'll sit back in my car and I'll be, all right, buddy, prove it to me. And he'd be like, prove what? I said, prove to me you're a real drug addict. And he's looking at me with this look like, what? What is this? I said, dude, let me tell you, I've been around. I've done a lot of nasty ass shit. I am comfortable in the dirt. And I don't believe you've even seen half of it. I think you're a fronter. I think you're faking. I think you're just coming in here to get some free coffee. And unless you convince me that you're a real deal card carrying member of Drug Addicts Anonymous, I don't think I can sponsor you. So go, prove it to me. And if he throws some lightweight story out, I'm like, really? What? I did this. You telling me that? And he's like, well, wait a minute. I did this. And I'm like, oh, that's bullshit, man. Did you do this? And before I know it, it becomes a bit of a pissing contest because you cannot get an alcoholic to have their ego offended that somehow they don't measure up. And I think that's a much more effective approach if you guys are sponsoring people out there. Make your sponsee work for it. Prove to you why he needs to do the 12 steps. He's really proving it to himself. But you don't have to sit there and make him tell you or pry his teeth out. That just doesn't work. And then after I get done doing that, we start shifting to the second phase of the first step because the first step is in two components. First part says we admitted we are powerless over alcohol or drugs, or it could be cell phone, or it could be Cheetos, whatever our ism is, whatever our thing we're struggling with. And that our lives have become unmanageable. Now, that word means nothing to my patients nowadays. They can't even spell it, and they don't even know. We don't even use that in language nowadays, unmanageable. Every time I have to write that out on a note, I'm like, damn, there's a lot of letters in this word. So I say to them that my life has turned into a shit show. Can you tell me what it's done to your life to turn it into a shit show? And again, I say, go. And then they give some half-hearted things. And I'll say, well, I don't know, man. I don't know if you're convincing me or not. It doesn't sound that bad. But it seems like the more I needle them with that, the more they get indignant and the more they want to share. And then they start opening up about the real stuff. And so you might ask, well, what is Christopher looking for? What's the point of this exercise? Well, I'm looking for the gut level honesty for my guy to tell me a story that makes him do this, where he can't even show his face to me. That's the truth. All this other stuff is lightweight stuff they would tell in a jail cell or a bar, and they would boast about it. Yeah, I wrecked a car one night, ran away from the cops. It was hilarious. I don't care about that. What'd you do to your mom? I love going into treatment centers and into halfway houses when I speak and nobody seems to be really caring what I'm saying. I'll stop talking and I'll do a little bit of Burns Brady, who was my sponsor, and I'll say, all right, screw that. Let's talk about what we did to our mothers. And you can see the people's heads look away from you because they don't want to admit that they kept mom up all night worrying, or they drove her to an early grave, or they spent up all her money, or they stole their possessions. Now, the good news is, after he gets honest with me, I can condition some of that guilt and shame. I don't want him to drown in that guilt and shame. So I'll say, look, ultimately, this is an illness and you were powerless over doing those things. And I'll try to get him to tell me a story about how his powerlessness manifested. And I tell him my story that there was one night, there was many days, but there was one day in particular where this is just insane. I was out of control. I'm walking through the dining room in my parents' house and nobody's home, and I looked over and all I saw was silver. And I know that silver is pawnable. You can get money for that. And I couldn't think of anything else to pawn because I had stolen everything else and had been locked down and kept away from me ever since then. So I decided to grab as much of it as I could out of the cabinet and take it downtown to pawn it. And these were my mom's championship trophies from the State Fair Horse Show in Louisville, which is a big deal. For those of you in the equestrian field, it's a big deal. And she won these when she was a child, first place, all that stuff. And they have tremendous sentimental value to her. Now, we say, when alcoholics do what they do, they're not completely out of touch with reality. They seem like it in their behaviors, but they always have that little voice inside saying, this isn't good. You should probably not do this, right? But they just don't pay attention to it because they can't. Their brain is saying, get the drugs, get the drugs. But I'm driving downtown with this, and the whole time I'm going down, I'm like, you're a dick. You're a complete ass. I cannot believe you're doing this to your own mom. You need to turn around and stop and get this back there before anybody comes home and they won't know you did it. And I could not turn the steering wheel. And I got to tell you, the look of recognition I'll get in my patients as they start seeing, oh man, I've done that. I've experienced that. Then I'm starting to break through on what powerless means. How about the powerlessness of knowing you shouldn't buy these shitty foods, and maybe you have some diagnoses where they're telling you if you keep eating this way, you're going to die. And then you get to the checkout counter and there it is in your cart. Or you've been threatened with bankruptcy and you've got a lot of bills that you haven't paid yet. And you're like, I just got to stop ordering shit, man. And before you know it, the Amazon boxes are on your doorstep because you ordered something else. Or gambling, insert whatever. It's that thing that I don't know what's happened, but at a certain point, I've lost complete control of the ship. I cannot stop this thing. It seems to be avalanching out of control on me. All right. So that's number one. Can I admit my powerlessness over fixing myself over my situation? Second step of the first step is that part about the unmanageability and how my life has become a shit show. To get that idea of a power greater than ourselves that we need to fix us, I will usually use what the big book has. I think it's the best phrase for it, and it's later in the book where Bill actually says, no human power could stop us from being alcoholic. And then I will usually quiz my guy. All right, teach me. Who tried to stop you? Did your parents try to stop you? Yes, of course. Did your friends and family, other members try to stop you? Yes, certainly. How about the cops? Everybody running the law? Yeah, you've been to jail one time in DUI? Okay, they tried to stop you. These guys have guns. Even they couldn't stop you? That's interesting. Okay, how about neighbors, community, anything else? Your boss has the power of your paycheck. They try to stop you, tell you to stop coming in late drunk? Yeah, okay. Yeah, they didn't stop you. How about go to any treatment centers? You've been to the experts. These are the guys that are trained and they have the experience and the knowledge. They're supposed to be able to save you, but even they couldn't save you. You used after treatment? Yep, used after treatment. Okay, and then finally, have you been to AA or even the church? Have you talked to your pastor? This is a man of God. Or have you listened to a sponsor? They're supposed to know how to get well. They couldn't even get you well. No, they couldn't get you well. Do you know why? And I'll wait for him to connect the dots. And he's like, oh, like it says on the page, because no human power is able to relieve this for me. This is an interesting phrase. I'm going to break it down for you guys, because we go to the doctor and we hope that our doctor can fix our medical issue, but it is not the doctor responsible for fixing you. I was taught this by a very wise man in our program. He said a farmer doesn't grow the crops. He said a farmer tills the soil. He waters it. He does fertilizing, plants seed, and he creates an environment where the growing can take place. But he is not doing the actual growing. Same as a doctor. A doctor will dress your wound, try to clean it out from infection, put a little antibiotic on it and patch it up, and then tell you what to do to take care of it. And then he's created an environment for the healing to take place. There is a mysterious factor of a power. Human beings don't have that power. I don't. If you come to me with a wound, I can't say you're healed. And if I do, you better watch out and put me in the hospital somewhere if I believe I can do that. There's something odd that we take responsibility for that as humans and say, well, my doctor fixed it, but did your doctor fix it? Or was he just the agent in the middle of the actual fixing and healing? He set the shoulder right in surgery, and then the healing took place beyond his power. So that's what we're saying. We're saying no human power can fix you because human beings are flawed. And if you're going to rely on a higher power as a human being as a higher power, you're going to be screwed before you start out. So be very careful about that. Codependence, beware. Making anybody the center part of your life, sole focus, higher power over you, always leads to disaster. Always leads to disaster. So if I can get my guy to just buy into those two concepts, I am completely powerless over fixing it. I don't know what else to do. I've come to you for help. I'm willing to let go. And my life's just a mess, man. I don't even know where to start to fix it. And it's funny how many of my patients, well, they were talking about this today about how, I got sober, but it's worse. And then Travis, our good friend, comes to aftercare and says, yeah, when I got sober, it got worse too, because I had a lot of consequences I still hadn't dealt with yet. Just because you quit drinking or drugging, you laid down your solution doesn't mean things are going to get better immediately. So they will struggle with that, to say the least. But if I can buy into those two things, my life's a mess and I'm powerless, then I'm like, all right, well, we need to look at this concept about seeking out a power greater than yourself. And that is where step 2 comes in. Because the old joke about step 1 and when I came in 83, they were using the old timer joke, which was, well, if I just let go, I'll be the hole in the donut. What will I be if I'm not running my own life? Blah, blah, blah. And we say, don't worry about it, dude. There's powers other than that besides yourself that could work here. So step 2 says we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I like the process of coming to believe. It's a process. I do think it's important to go see people who are healthy. This might not be your case. That's easy to do if you're an overeater and you're reluctant to go to an Overeaters Anonymous meeting, or if you're a spendaholic and you're reluctant to go to a Spenders Anonymous meeting. But please do, even if it's just on Zoom. What you will hear are stories of people who have already conquered it through using these tools, and it will give you the smallest hope inside, like, wow. I mean, I heard that guy's story and he was way worse than I was, but he's doing it, man. Look at him. He's clean a year and he's got a house back and his wife is back and kids love him now. They're at the birthday. Look at the kids. They love him. Then I get that little hope that maybe that can happen for me too, which is the coming to believe process. You're not going to believe it at first. A person in pain is going to immediately doubt that any solution is going to work. That won't work. This is going to suck. That's natural. So you have to sort of surround yourself with people who are doing it and they're getting positive results. And that is very infectious. We see that with our young guys coming into our group all the time. We mirror for them getting up and speaking. And then we have a segment in our meeting. If anybody out there wants to start this in your own home group, I will tell you it's a beautiful thing. We take the last 15 minutes of group and we let the people that are in their first 90 days or brand new to our meeting speak and jump the line of anybody that's got their name on the list. And they will mirror what we've been mirroring for them. We mirror, get up, be honest, share your stuff, just be where you're at. And then they get up and do it and they're all nervous, like, I don't really do this. And suddenly they're doing it and they're getting better right before your eyes. And they start to get that little hope that maybe this could work. Maybe this could work. Maybe this could work. I was told by my sponsor that giving an alcoholic or addict hope is like giving a man in a desert a drink of water. That is just more than anything else. That's what you need when you're on your last rung with this disease and going down. You need somebody to throw you a shot of hope. So I come to believe that maybe this could work for me. And when they say a power greater than ourselves, people in meetings, if you go to any meeting where they talk about step 2, they're already talking about God. And I'm like, wait a minute, it doesn't say anything about God in the second step. And again, we're going to deal with that next time. So don't worry about it for today. But it's saying a power greater than you, which we just agreed on in step 1 is what you need. So I can easily dispel that for my guys. Stop it. We're not talking about God. How about me? How about me as my sponsor, as your sponsor? I have a car that works. You have no car. I can get you to the meeting. Is that a power greater than you? Yes. All right, good. Let's use that. Keep it real damn simple. I mean, my simple list when my sponsor came in and they said, choose somebody who has what you want. This guy had a house. I was living in a halfway house. He had a beautiful wife. All the women in my life had said, you're a loser. Bye-bye. He had money in his pocket to buy me pie and coffee after the meeting. I had no money except for cigarettes and to pay my rent, barely. He had a great job. I had a shitty job that I hated every moment of. And he was respected and admired by his peers. And nobody in the group was listening to me. I'm a dumb newcomer. And I looked at that. Plus, he had a sense of humor. He's a very wise and he had a great wry sense of humor. I love this man, Roger. He's a beautiful man. And I was like, I want that. That's what I don't have in my life. That will make my life better. And so to me, that was my short list of if you want what I have. And that was a power greater than me because I wasn't able to do that at that time in my life. So when it says in the second step, came to believe that a power greater than myself, that means anything outside of you that gives you some kind of inspiration. Ideally, it's your sponsor or the group. You come in every Tuesday. These guys in my group who are just starting out are telling me, man, I can't wait till Tuesday. It's so juicy. I get so excited. I get such good stuff from all the guys in there. They all give me hugs and they care about me. Use that as your higher power. If all else fails, and we're not getting to God yet, my sponsor at one point said to me, because I had so much vitriol over this idea of God and in my programming, again, next episode, he said to me, well, I've heard you bitch about a lot of shit, but there's one thing I've not heard you bitch about. What do you think about cats? And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, you like cats, don't you? You got a cat, don't you? I said, yeah, fucking cats are cool. He says, can you make a cat? And I was like, stupid question. Of course I can't make a damn cat. What are you talking about? Can we agree that you can't make a cat? Yes, I agree. I can't make a cat. Okay, but something made a cat. Yes, something made a cat. And so if you don't have the power to make a cat, something greater than you had greater power to make a cat. Can we agree with that? Yes. Use cats as your higher power. It was so ridiculous, and yet it worked. I could hold my cat, and I could look at the beauty of this animal and say, I can't create this. There's got to be something bigger than me in this universe. Pretty brilliant, right? But it takes us newcomers a while. It took me a while to get around to that. That's it. It's about ego deflation. And Bill was a genius that he knew addicts and alcoholics were going to need this. The first step to admit I'm powerless. I've lost control of my life. I'm not doing a good job. I'm failing is what it really is. And that I need something else to help me. If you can't get that bit of humility, then you haven't had your ass beat enough. And then last piece of the second step says we're going to restore us to sanity. And this is a very weird turn of a phrase because you would think Bill would say, restore me to sobriety. But his argument was, I'm not so sure we were ever really sober. Some of us started at a pretty young age as we were going through life. Maybe age 2, I might have been a little sober in my thinking, but after that, it was a mess. So this idea that returned me to sanity, I'm not even sure I knew what sanity was because I grew up in an alcoholic family system. To me, the insane was normal. To me, chaos was normal. To me, drama was absolutely normal. So you're going to put me in a situation where you're like, all right, we're going to restore you to sanity. Give me an idea what that looks like. He goes, well, I'm going to help you make better decisions that will keep you out of consequences. That's one piece of sanity. And I'm going to help you align who you are and what your goals are with your actions. Here's insane thinking that average people do. You may have seen this in your friends and family. Man, I really need to go on a diet. If I don't go on a diet, I'm going to have some health problems. Man, I really need to stop eating this shitty food. I need to quit smoking. I need to do all that. Yeah, I need to start running. I need to exercise. And then they don't. They don't make any changes. And we've all seen this in our friends. So you're telling me that your soul is being called to this higher level to grow and to have something more in your life. And then I'm not doing anything about it. That's a disconnect. And so that's what he meant by sanity, lining up my values and what I want out of life to get my actions to support that. As an addict or an alcoholic, my actions were contrary to my values and they were keeping me back from reaching my dreams. Okay. You have to align things together. So I like that idea of restoring me to sanity. I'll give you a piece of insanity that happens in our culture every day. The insanity that the corporation actually cares about me. And I'm going to spend all of my life and life's blood at this company over hours and not be home for my kids to be at the ball game or to see them grow up. And before I know it, they're going to be leaving the house, and I'm going to miss that. And yet, out of my mouth, I'm saying my kids are the most important thing to me. Now, this is an easy example with my patients because they'll be saying my kids are the most important thing to me, and they're at the trap house smoking crack all day. And their mom is taking care of their kids and now has custody of them. And they will still sit there and defend, I'm a good mom. That's what we mean by insanity. But it happens in all those little ways too. I'm not really spending money anymore. I just got this one little small thing. It only costs $10. Or I'm not really I know I need to go to bed and sleep better. I know I'm killing my brain by not getting enough sleep, but I just want to play this last little video game or just want to watch this one more episode of Netflix. Our culture just thrives on that insanity and those rationalizations we tell ourselves that it's going to be okay. So thank God, Bill is telling us we can find this power greater than ourselves that will help to restore us to sanity. And then he leaves us hanging because he doesn't really tell us what that God stuff is all about till we get to step 3. And I'm going to leave you all hanging on that till the next episode as well. But for anybody out there that's struggling with any issue in your life, if you missed the message today, I want to sum it up for you. Stop working on it yourself. That's it. Be honest with yourself about how much progress you're really making on this son of a gun doing it all by yourself. And then switch up your tactics. Bring some other power into it. Maybe it's the power of a therapist, or maybe it's the power of I'm going to go check out this group or this new church, whatever swings your boat. But do something different to attack the problem. And then see if you can scientifically lean back and notice a shift in the energy and that you're actually seem to get some traction and going in a different direction and making progress. Then continue to do it because that's validation. That's the right direction. So that's step 1. And then step 2, just know that you're not the greatest power in the world. And I know if you present that to any normal person, they're going to look at you and say, what are you talking about? I don't think I know everything. I don't think I'm the greatest power, but they act that way. Why don't you go to the therapist? I don't need that stuff. Why don't you try this new thing? Well, I'm not sure about that, man. I got something to do. It's just defenses. It's who we are. It's natural. And overall, too, I hope you find a coach, a sponsor, a friend, somebody to do this journey with that you can hold each other accountable, maybe. But that makes it so much easier to cut through your own BS. When there's somebody right there and you're trying to sell them on something and they're just giving you that look like, without even saying anything, you know they know you're full of it. So I hope that's helpful. It's a miracle cure. It truly is. It works for anything. There are meetings for any issue you have on this planet. There are meetings, thousands and thousands of different types of meetings out there using the 12 steps. Something has changed in our walk of a species. So check it out. All right. So just curious for our good friend Dan the man. The kids always like to hear what Dan has to say from his experience on maybe still step 1 and 2 questions or education. What do you think, Dan?
It's definitely humbling that people might want to hear what I had to say. You know, as we said before the show started, was that you know, you can feel there's evidence if a guy has step 1. That's usually, as a sponsor, that's what I'm mining for. You know, will he do the things? You know, because that's, you know, it's like signs of surrender. And I don't remember if it was Scott Lee, I think it was talked about these guys who want to negotiate the terms of their surrender. You know, and when I have, you know, like, call me every day. Well, man, every day, you know, and you get the guys that want to negotiate with it, you know, it starts showing that, well, things aren't really that bad, I guess. Are you going, you know, like, too busy to go to meetings, you know, and to take that straight into your step 2 stuff that's where we start bending, doing something different, right? You know, I mean, I didn't want to go to meetings in the beginning. I didn't really want to. Even when I was fully step 1 and knew that I was fucked, I still didn't really want to. One great help for me is that during the home incarceration program, you know, I went in there and I put down in one meeting every single day. And, I had to do what I put on that piece of paper. So if I didn't want to go to a meeting, then I was going to have to call the law and tell them, call my probation officer and tell him that I don't want to go to the meeting. And you sure ain't going to do that. And that kind of comes into the same thing when you have a sponsor, right? Because you just said it a minute ago about like, when we isolate and we're up in our own heads and we're just doing our own thing, we come up with all kinds of goofy ideas or rationalize and talk ourselves into doing stuff that we know really deep down inside we shouldn't. And I won't tell you about it because I know you balk at this particular thing. And I've always said, if there's anything that I'm afraid to tell my sponsor I'm getting ready to do, I probably shouldn't do it. That's pretty good evidence if I don't want to talk about it. But
Bob Earl used to say that, being his struggles with smoking cigarettes. And then you'd see other people smoking and he would just lovingly pull up on them and say, it's going to kill you, right?
Yeah.
And they would go, I know. So literally, but you got to do it. It's an addiction.
Yep. And, my friends that smoke, I talk to them on the telephone, and what I hear the whole time they're talking to me is coughing and coughing and coughing. And, but nicotine is a tough one.
Monster addiction.
Yeah, it really is.
It was the hardest thing for me to quit.
Yeah. I've been unable to. I've had periods of sobriety, but
and that terrifies me because it does sometimes appeal to me. I'll be sitting there going, Dan does these little nicotine lodges. Maybe I could do, even Mark Maron does the little nicotine lodges. I'm like, I could do that. And I know I do not need to be doing that, dude. I've already got high blood pressure. What the hell's wrong with me?
And when I quit that, it was a good couple years that I was off of that. It like a bell went off inside where I knew that I wasn't going to be able to, moderate it. There's a lot of programs around that was telling me that I was going to be able to moderate that chemical when I was completely unable to moderate any other chemical in my life, but I'm going to be able to cut back on this one. And, I encourage guys to give a shot at doing that, but I don't see that happen too much, man. You were talking earlier too. There was something that made me think of, and it might be I can't remember who says, but like, it's go paraphrase. It says, what we learned in life's morning isn't much good to us in the afternoon. And what we learn in the afternoon isn't much good to us in the evening. And that thing about where I'm going to have to set down the things, all over the book, it says we're going to have to put down what we think we know. Scott Lee says, what I think I know for certain ain't true. And, getting that, I think some of the most, you had said, I could quit anytime I want, right? If a guy tells me that, well, I'm probably beating against a empty wall at the moment. He's still slamming his head into going straight.
He's saying,
not turning.
Still got it. I still got control of this. Yeah.
And then the other thing that really bugs me is when I'm talking to a guy and he keeps on coming off with that I know business. I know, I know. Because you have to get to this point, and Travis and I were talking about it the other day, and I've heard other people say it, like the longer I'm around, honestly, the less I think I know. It's although that's not quite the truth, but I've let go my need to be right about everything. And it's a whole lot easier to walk through life with a maybe I'm wrong attitude.
Well, the way you broke that down for one of your sponsees recently just blew me away, because I think it would really help our listeners. But it describes better than anything this idea that you think you know everything. You said to this person who was much younger to you, you said, he said, do you remember when you were 16 or 17? And how old are you now? And he said 34 or something. And you said, you remember looking back, what a dumbass you were at 16 and 17. He goes, oh, yeah, man, I didn't know what I was talking about. He says, well, I'm 54. And when you said that, it was like clear as a bell that 20 years down the road past this dude, you might know something he don't know.
Yeah.
Simple.
Yeah. It's definitely, that's this power greater than myself. People that are down the path further than me, that maybe can shed some light on something that can help me get further down the line.
Well, Bill says we have to become teachable. That's what humility means, is am I teachable? But boy, do we have to have a lot of ass whoopings to get there. I mean, I was just thinking about my own story, and I, use 2 treatment centers, halfway house, and everybody has their line. And I think I know your line was probably going to prison for 20 years.
Yeah. Going to prison for any years.
I agree. 100%. Me too. Sign me up. But my sponsor pointed out You know, I used to say my line's homelessness and going to prison. Those are my two lines I just refused to cross. And I was actually contemplating that on my last use. I used even after getting out of that halfway house. Had one last go around. And I'm sitting there thinking, are you going to spend your paycheck and go out on the streets in this town where you don't know anybody? And as soon as I said to my sponsor, so my line was homelessness, he says, no, get that right, young newcomer. You were homeless. You were in a halfway house.
That is homeless.
You were not getting an electric bill there or anything. That's not your home.
Yeah. Sleeping in your mom's basement still.
But man, I had a
considered
patient
homeless.
recently when in their chart they were saying that they would, where do you live? My house.
Yeah.
It's not their house. They're living with their parent.
Yeah.
Again, that insanity, that little twist of a word convinces me that I'm still doing good.
Still hanging in there. Yeah.
No, dude, you're not doing good. You're 50 and you're living with your mom. That is not doing good. But you wrote down it's my house.
Yeah. Yep. That rationalization, justification stuff. Step two, as you alluded to, was a lot of observation for me. Was seeing, because when I was in that, I don't even really think about doing step 1 and 2. I don't know that there's any doing around step 1 and 2. We work step 1 and 2. We go through it. We do that. But for me, it was purely that, going into meetings and seeing people that had something I didn't have and believing that, if they could do it, and now listening to their stories and listening to the madness that was once a part of their lives that was no longer. And they had nice cars and they had nice clothes and looked like they, jewelry on and various other things, more than anything else, the light in their eyes and the smiles on their faces began to get me to believe, sometimes I boil it down for my people. Then I say, hey, do you think what is working for those 40 men in that meeting Tuesday night, that what's working for them, do you think what's working for them can work for you? And, most of the time the answer is yes, and if they don't know, it's another Scott Lee thing of, well, do you believe that I believe that those guys? Well, we'll go on my belief for now, because I got with one of my sponsees, one of my beloved, as you say, beloved sponsees. I asked him that question when we were in that part of the work. Do you believe this will work for you? And he said, Dan, I am just not sure it'll work for me. And I said, do you believe that I believe that it'll work for you? And he said, you're effing sure it'll work for me. And I said, okay, well, we'll go on my belief.
Go with mine.
Yeah, and that's good enough. Let's keep moving. But step 1 and 2 is it's kind of mystical, to use your word earlier. It's
and if it could be helpful for anybody that doesn't have a program available or a sponsor, just talk to your best friends. They've watched you struggle all these years with the same things. I always say to people, if you can't see it in yourself, certainly you have a friend or a family member that you've watched go through a cycle. Could be an abusive relationship cycle, could be a bad health cycle, and they just don't change.
Yeah.
So talk to them. Say, man, they're telling me I'm powerless over Cheetos. What do you think? And then see what they say.
Yeah, because I don't see myself very well. I have a different view. It's like a body dysmorphia kind of thing. It's a complete life dysmorphia that when I look at my life, I don't see it. But yeah, go talk to some of the people who's gotten to ride along with your madness and have them share some truth with you. That would be definitely a humbling experience. I don't know how many people could actually do that. Hey, Mom, what kind of screwed up stuff have I done?
Now let's offer the carrot on the stick, because ultimately we didn't talk about step 1 is about surrender. And that's a term when I was working with my military members, they just could not swallow, because that's the one thing you don't do. You don't surrender. And I said, well, let's look at it a different way. When I actually took that step of letting go to my sponsor and I gave him the steering wheel, I talked about this in aftercare today, I had a sense of peace overcome me that was unlike anything I'd felt maybe in my entire life. It was the feeling that I no longer have to do the dance. I no longer put in all this work and effort to maintain the show, the illusion that I'm doing so great and I have all the answers and I'm just fine. Everything's fine over here with Christopher. Don't look too close. And I could just let go and let him have the steering wheel of my life, and I'm no longer in charge. And I slept better that night walking home almost on air, having made that decision to give this man control of my path, than I'd ever slept in years. And it was so relaxing. I tell my patients, man, to be able to go to a meeting and somebody asks you a question about something having to do with the program, you're like, don't ask me. I'm a newcomer. I don't know nothing. I'm just sitting here drinking my coffee, man. I'm just here. And it was a very relaxing. The rest of my life, I felt like I had to continually present this image that everything's fine, and it's not. So, did you have that feeling that night when you asked me to sponsor you?
I was just getting ready to talk about that. Yeah, it was the warm blanket thing, and I really, at the time, I'm so nutty that I don't really know what's going on, really. But as I've said 100 times, I walked out of the church that night after you saying you'd work with me, and the sky was brighter, the stars were brighter, and something was going on, and I felt a level of comfort that everything, there was a feeling that everything was going to be okay. And I had huge, big consequences sitting on my shoulders. Like I said, at that point in time, it was still 6 to 20 years in prison. And I walked out of there, shared this, traveling lighter, feeling my whole spirit felt lighter, like, okay, we can get this thing going now.
You had a little bit of hope of coming to believe at that moment.
Yeah.
And I know it's a scary prospect, guys, but you have to try it. Once you get to that moment where you've exhausted all your other resources, at least try something new. All righty. Again, if you have any questions about this process or anything we talk about in this podcast, please send us your questions. I'll give you that address again later. But we want to hear from you, or write in the comments, please. We love to hear from you in the comments.
And if you're listening to this on YouTube, back it up a minute and you'll see the address stretched across the screen whenever Christopher mentions it.
Also, sorry to have to do this as everyone does, but please like and subscribe. We're trying to raise our analytics so that we can get a little bit more viewership. We've had a great start. The amount of people who have shared and seen it and shared how much it meant to them and helped them, I'm awed and I'm humbled by that. But we want to offer this to everybody. And remember, there's people out there in remote places who don't have any access to doctors or to hospitals and treatment centers. So please, this may be their only chance to hear some good, healthy tools to help them save their life from this addiction. So it's a little thing. I know it's a hard thing. Some people just don't want to do it, but please like and subscribe. It helps us immensely to keep this deal going. All right, so let's get into the question portions of the program for today. We got 2 great questions for today, and like I said, send your questions, and here's the address again, iam12recovery@gmail.com, iam12recovery@gmail.com, and we will be happy to help you with any issue you have in your life. All right, first letter for today. I got sober a couple of years ago. Congratulations, that's freaking awesome. My mom, who is an active alcoholic, has told me on multiple occasions that me getting sober has hurt our relationship. We used to discuss our problems, and we used to share in that negative camaraderie, shitty outlooks and perspectives with no solution in sight. That sounds like my entire family upbringing, actually. Nowadays, I don't really have much to talk to her about. Anytime I share something good that has happened in my life, it is immediately met with jealousy or turned around to be, well, that's great for you, but that'll never happen for me. I want very much to be supportive of my mother. I listened to her complain for about an hour before she asked me how I am doing. As my sponsor told me once, I feel like I get slimed every time we talk. She plays the victim in her life, and she's becoming pretty good at it. My question is this: where do I draw the line? How long do I listen to her crap and her not do anything about it? I was once in the same place as she was, so I understand where she is coming from. I want to be there for her and point her to where I found help, such as in the groups in AA. At times she will say she wants it, but, quote unquote, she's not like us. So what you're dealing with there, and I think it's really important before you begin any approach to fixing a situation, know what you're dealing with. And if you're dealing with an active addict alcoholic, then call that for what it is, because an active alcoholic is in the throes of a disease that's telling the person they're not sick, they don't have it. And anything you throw at them will be deflected like a bullet off Superman, that they just can't hear it, and they will never be able to see it no matter what angle you try. And you're welcome to suggest coming to the meeting. You're welcome to offer some hope and say, there's a place you can go. But if a person rejects it, you've got to honor that and say, well, they have their own process. But I want to help deeper than that. First thing you want to do is protect yourself from anything that's going to hold your tail feathers down as you're trying to soar and grow in your sobriety. We have to be selfish in that respect. I don't believe it's self-care. I don't believe it's selfish. I believe it's self-care. We've talked about that in another episode. But for you to hold yourself back in your recovery to a point where it affects your outlook with that shitty attitude, or it affects your ability to help others or stay sober yourself, that would be falling directly into codependency, and we want to avoid that. And it's real difficult, though, when it's a relative or a friend that you care so much about. And from a relationship of a male child to a mother, and seeing her suffer and going down with this disease, it's not as painful as having a child who has this disease, but it's pretty damn painful. And I have my own experience with saying, hey, this is a great thing. Y'all should check it out. And they check it out maybe for a little bit, and then they're like, well, it doesn't really fit me. I had a relative one time say to me, those people are really sick in there. And I'm like, yes. Of course they are. That's why they come to the meetings, because they're very sick. And we have a saying in the program that is a truism. The person that says there's a lot of sick people in there is usually the sickest person in the room, and they don't even know they're sick. And when we say sick, we just mean that they're just caught up in their own stuff. They don't see how they're affecting other people. And I don't think your mom really sees how she's affecting you. So people don't respond to the approach of you. So I'm always encouraging my patients, when you're dealing with something you need to confront as a boundary, maybe don't go in there with, you need to do this, you're doing this, blah, 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 because naturally people will throw their walls up and you won't get anywhere. But if you go in with this, when this happens, this is how I feel. When I try to share my program with you and you may say some negative things, it makes me feel really down about myself. Now, if you say it in a way that doesn't sound accusatory, your mom might actually be like, well, wait a minute, I'm not trying to make you feel down about yourself. I want you to be sober and happy. You're my son. And they might actually check themselves. But it's tricky, because human beings have a hard time seeing their own behaviors, no matter how you present it to them. I'm a big fan of consequences. That's, human animals. We're just like dogs and cats. You got to rub that dog's face in the feces occasionally if it keeps going to the bathroom in the house. Until they learn that negative reinforcement, they're going to probably keep doing it. So if you need to pull back, I honor that. If you need to say, Mom, I love you, but this is just not working for me for my sobriety, we need to take some time off from each other. From the beginning of me coming into the program, I heard people tell stories about, well, I'm just not going to go home for Christmas this year because it's just too dangerous for my sobriety, or I just can't deal with it. And I was used to like being all of that, because, Christmas is huge in my family. And if you don't show up, you might be disowned. And I actually did miss a Christmas because I was in treatment for one of them. I'm not sure they were ready to let me back in so easily after missing that. Not in my control, but it just is what it is. But I do know there's a lot of people in the program who have taken that brave step, and I've not yet heard one say that they regretted it. Because why? Because on the other end of it, they stayed sober, they ended up having a better life, and then maybe they were in a better place to understand and tolerate the other person for what they do. And ultimately, it comes down to acceptance. How much of this person can I accept being exactly who they are? And how much does it cost me to accept them? So if you need to limit the time you're around them, not take the phone calls when you're not in a good place to take the phone call, I think those little boundaries do help. And the other person doesn't even have to know you're setting the boundary. You're kind of doing it for yourself. But there's no reason you should have to sit there and allow another alcoholic addict's bad attitude to infect you. And I'm telling you, we're very vulnerable to that. I work with people every day. I get slimed on a daily basis. And I've got some great seasoned tools where I'm able to unslime myself and vent to my sponsor, or go take a shower, or go work out, or do something. I used to love to go swim. At least I'm underwater. That totally cleans you of the slime. But if you do it too often, you don't take care of yourself, it will cause you to backslide. So keep us updated. Keep asking about it. Keep looking for other people's suggestions. I think one of the key points is we want it so badly for the people we love, and we're just not God. We can't play God like that. Whether they get it or not is up to them and their journey. I have no control over whether they pick up the tools or not. And also set that best example for her. As long as you're showing her that you're growing and getting better, maybe it'll click for her. But I'm sorry that this one phrase really stuck out at me. That's great for you, but it'll never happen for me. That's like cynical hopelessness right there. Sorry you're going through that, my friend, but please update us. Let us know if anything changes, and one day at a time. That's all we got. All right. Second question for today. I am an opiate and meth addict with over 9 years clean and facing major oral surgery very soon. I'm afraid of the pain, but I'm actually more afraid of a relapse from the pain meds in my recovery. So what advice can you offer about this? Thank you very much. That is one of the most common issues everybody in recovery is going to have to deal with. We do get people who come in, especially hardcore felons. I tend to run into this the most, who will say, I'm never taking another pain med in my life. I don't care who cries. And I'm like, well, apparently you've never had open heart surgery, because if you had open heart surgery, you'd be crying like a baby to give you something for that pain. All of us, I repeat, all of us are going to have to deal with this issue at some point where we have to be on pain meds, and we have to navigate that as a medication, not as a means to get high. Now, number one thing I was taught, we don't do it alone. That is the biggest issue. I never touch the bottle. I don't have my hands on the pills, and I'm not controlling the medication. I've walked a lot of men through this. I'm talking about major opiate addicts, people who have been to prison with opiate because of opiates, people who have, pardon the French, shot a needle in their dick. So if they were able to do it, you can do it too. But I highly recommend the pamphlet. If you go to the AA website, aa.org, and you look up pamphlets, they have all the free pamphlets downloadable in PDF form. And there is a pamphlet called Medication and the AA Member. And it's a 7-step process where it says, first thing, don't you have control of the medications. Let your doctor know your situation. Have a plan for afterwards in case that maybe you might need to detox. Even my beloved sponsor, Dr. Burns Brady, had major surgery and he got hooked. And he didn't know he was hooked. But his wife, thank God, saw it one night. And she literally said, oh my God, it's got you. And she whisked him right off to the hospital. And that man had to do a detox to get off it. And he didn't intentionally use it. It just slipped in on him. It's not like he was, going right to, I'm going to use these and hoard them and hide them. It just slipped in that he was starting to need them and he didn't want to get off them. And those drugs particularly are very tricky, but it's nothing you have to be afraid of, because in my direct experience, because I went through this myself, when I had to be on they were agreed lightweight opiates for a surgery I had one time, treating them like medication, I never got that desire to think, oh, well, I could take the whole bottle. Now, that's twice in my sobriety where I've had to deal with that. And there was one time where I had some left over at the end. And it was really interesting how the whole time when I was taking the medication, I never thought once about abusing them. But then when I looked at when I didn't need them anymore, I woke up one morning and the voice in my head said, you've got 9 pills left. And even if it's low grade, if you took all 9, that'd be a hell of a buzz. I got terrified. The voice was talking to me, and I really hadn't heard it with that kind of power for years, even decades up till that point. And I got up immediately and tossed him right in the toilet and called my sponsor. Flushed him right away. I didn't trust to do it after I got up and peed or after I got up and had breakfast. We were going to do it right now. That's the kind of thing we have to watch out for. And also in that pamphlet, it talks about honesty. You have got to be so ironclad honest with your sponsor during that process that if any time it starts to talk to you or you're thinking about, I don't really need it yet, but let me ask for one extra before my next dose. You got to start telling your sponsor that that's the disease starting to slip its toe in the door. And as my sponsor, Burns Brady, said, first comes the toe, then comes the ankle, then comes the whole leg. And before you know it, this thing will just run you over, man. So I would not avoid pain meds. Please hear me on that. That's the biggest mistake people make. Because then all of a sudden you come home and you denied getting a prescription, and suddenly you wake up at midnight and you need something so bad you need to go to the hospital. And suddenly you're thinking, well, I can't get any pain meds. The pharmacy is closed, so I'm going to run to Walgreens and get a bottle. And before you know it, you've relapsed because you were trying to be brave and be a man saying, I don't need no pain meds. So my rule of thumb as a sponsor is, why don't you get them anyway? It's harder to get them when you need them later than it is to let them give it to you at first. If they're telling you need to take this home, all right, let me take this. I'm going to give it to my wife immediately, whatever, whoever's going to have hold of them. But get them. You don't know how it's going to go. We're going to take it one step at a time. Maybe you can get off without any pain meds. but we're not going to leave it to chance. I've had several people who didn't get their meds, and then they're in a panic saying, I got to get something. They're trying to call their doctor to get something. They can't get the doctor on the phone, or now the doctor thinks they're drug seeking and won't give a script. And it's insane. I mean, literally the day before they were trying to hand them and force them the pills, and the day after saying, I'm not giving you nothing. So follow directions. Again, this is hard for us as addicts and alcoholics. We think we're so unique and we don't have to be like average people. Well, average people, if they have pain meds after a heart surgery, then that looks like that's what I'm going to have to do. Just different approaches. I have to follow different rules than they have to follow with these steps. So again, to sum up, get everybody on board with what you're doing. Let your doctor know your situation. Never have control of the medication. Make sure you have a plan to get off them for a detox, even if that includes going in somewhere for 3 days. And then when it's over, get rid of them. Don't hold on to them. A lot of people will hold on to them and say, well, what if I have an injury one day or I have back pain? No, it's not worth it. It's too much of a temptation, especially for people where opiates was your favorite chemical. It is navigatable and it is doable. And we have millions of people who have done it already. You just have to be honest, 100% honest with your supports about how it's tricking your mind and talking to you. So I hope that's helpful. But please don't deny yourself the pain meds. There's even doctors out there, I've heard stories where if you tell them your story, they get sketchy about giving you pills because they think they're going to cause you to relapse, and then you don't get your medication. So let's talk about that for 1 second, because I've actually pulled back from being brutally honest with my doctors. Now, my primary care knows my situation, and I'm blessed that she actually calls me occasionally for advice about one of her patients that might need to go to treatment. That's an honor, right? That's gifts of sobriety. But other doctors, I can read them, and I'm like, well, you know what? That was 40 years ago. I don't know if they really need to know that in terms of my medical care today. That's between me and my sponsor and my higher power in the program. So I do my own thing, but I don't trust. They all got sketched out after the opiate epidemic because now they were prosecuting doctors, which was the stupidest thing. They're going to let off the Sackler family and all these corporations that killed all these people and have them pay a pittance fine. Here, pay $900 million and you made $9 billion or more. But we're going to put doctors in jail. Stupid, idiotic corporations run the world. But that's what I'm saying. Be a little bit, if you feel safe with your doctor, let them know. But it's really more important that your wife, your support, your sponsor, everybody else knows what you're doing, because they're the ones that are going to be treating you when you leave the hospital, not your doctor as much. So thank you for that question. It's a very vital, common question that comes up for everybody. And let us know how it goes. If you feel like that, we'd love to hear an update. Those are our 2 questions for the week. And I'd like to thank everybody for sending those in. Hopefully, if it's been helpful, please send some more. We want to help you in any way we can here. Any thoughts on those questions, Dan? Anything hit you that maybe I didn't cover on any of those?
Well, one of the things, from back in the day, and if a guy's been sober 9 years off of the opiates, we always, and this was a problem. I would go get a tooth pulled and they'd give me 30 10 milligram Lortabs, Today they won't do that. So first off, they're not going to give you that many to begin with. I see people having surgeries all the time and they might send them home with 5 5s or something. So I know there's a little bit of fear there because of the big bottle and the leftovers and powerful medicine and all that. So, the truth of the matter is they're probably not going to send you home. But I I learned that from you, and I've watched a number of guys walk through, similar kind of things, without any problem.
Isn't it funny how they'll focus on the pills, but they forget, look, dude, you're going to have Novocaine and they have laughing gas. Yeah. So they have other ways to help you be comfortable without you worrying about getting hooked on opiates.
Yeah. And, it's a little bit of a tangent, but I feel the same, no more than I'm going to have a bottle of Lortab sitting around my house as I'm going to have a 6-pack in the refrigerator. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it being within arm's reach of me. So I make sure that, neither one of them, and you're exactly right. And that whole medical thing that happened was crazy. And they did go after some doctors because some doctors were dirty, but nowadays, and that's why they won't prescribe them over the telephone too. Why, when you call after the fact, that's getting sketched out with as far as the rules go on opiate distribution. They can write it for you when you're walking out of there after a procedure, no questions asked. But the call-ins and stuff get scrutinized because it's a completely different system today. If you're getting Heartburn medicine, no problem. It's a whole different system. When you put it on that pad for the opiates and the controlled substances, somebody's going to ask a question about why that was prescribed.
In our state, and it's true in other states, we have this thing called the Casper list, where every single prescription is reported to the government.
Yep.
But, there are alternatives, and I will present this to my patients at times, and they always go, poo-poo, that won't work. Or they'll say, well, I use those too. Well, maybe you didn't use it as much as you used heroin. But I know that tramadol and even trazodone, if you're having trouble sleeping with pain, and Tylenol 3s, and everybody's like, oh, Tylenol 3. Yeah, no, you know what? It's better than a Loratab. It may hit a different receptor point, and so you have to be open to other options and see what works.
And I have truly found that, and I don't take Dan's prescription because the bottle says don't do this. But when something is bad, and I've had a couple things, my back was all screwed up not long ago, if I take 3 Advils, 600 milligrams of Advil, and 1,000 to 500 Tylenols, and I take them all at the same time, works as good as any other pain medication I've ever had. I can go to sleep. I can work through the day. I don't want to stay doing that real long, but, that combination there knocks my pain in the butt if I have, like I said, a hurt knee or my back acts up or whatever. So, I don't, anytime where I'm thinking I need something more powerful than that, I think that's my disease talking to me.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was in a training 15 years ago where they were talking about the studies that they were doing, and they were seeing the evidence that alternate use of Tylenol and ibuprofen was more effective than opiates. Yeah. Now, when he said that in the training, I'm sitting there like this, and so was everybody else, like, really? Come on, what are you talking about? But it's so true that now you will find those products on the shelf where they're starting to mix acetaminophen with ibuprofen in certain medications. Mm-hmm. But what they studied in the study, and what seems to be most effective, is it tricks a different pain relief mechanism in your body. So if you take like the ibuprofen first, and you take a full amount, the 2 500s, whatever, or 2 200s. You could even take an 800 if you want to go full prescription strength. That's what they give you when they give you ibuprofens from the hospital. Take that first, but don't wait till it wears off. If it's going to have a 4-hour active period, at the 3-hour mark, you want to introduce the 2 Tylenols. And then at the same deal for that has a 4-hour, but don't wait 4, do 3, and then bop right back to the ibuprofens. And this is for chronic pain, people that are in consistent pain over time. Just give it a fair try. See if it could work. And there's something about that switch into the pain delivery system, relief system, that tricks the brain, is what the way he explained it to me. It's much more complicated than that. Yeah, but I'm really glad you brought that up.
Because there's the addict in me taking them all at once.
Right. But there are so many people out there. The number one, we talk about co-occurring disorders, dual diagnosis. We'll talk about all that in a different episode. But the number one that I run into, that I'm sure all my fellow clinicians run to, is chronic pain. Chronic pain is the number one trickiest, hardest co-occurring disorder to deal with when you're trying to get somebody sober. In fact, I've had people in my group come to group, and in assessment, they'll tell them, well, you can't take that while you're in this group. And I'll sit back and I'll go, all right, so I'm a counselor, and even I can see that's not going to work. They're going to be in so much pain, they'll be crying. How can a person in that much pain concentrate in group? And maybe that person is being told by their doctor or their pain management clinic, you have to take this because if you don't keep up your levels, we're not going to do surgery on you. They actually do that. Or we're not going to keep letting you come to pain management because you're screwing up what you should be doing. So we're monkeying with people's lives. And I see that a lot. Jails will take away your meds, let you die. They don't give a shit. And, but we shouldn't be doing that in treatment centers. And one of our sister hospitals has that approach where they won't even let you take antidepressants. In one of the houses, I'm like, what? Are you just asking them to have a meltdown and relapse? What are you doing? You're handicapping them before they start. So I am a very open-minded counselor, and I'm asking my fellow clinicians out there for just a little bit of sanity. You try imagining the worst pain you've ever imagined in your life and then triple it. Could you concentrate in group in that condition? I freaking sprained my ankle to the point it brought me to my knees in such pain I couldn't open my eyes. I knocked myself off a diving board and got a concussion where I saw stars. Now triple that. How could you operate and get your sobriety? So be flexible about it and be sensible. Hell, the other side I run into that is nurses and doctors over in the hospital that don't understand what detox is. And there's this belief among my fellows, I think everybody should experience opiate detox if they're going to treat people with opiate addiction, so they know what they're going through, and they'd have a little more sympathy for them. Get up. You need to go to brunch. You need to go to lunch. You need to get out of your bed and come to group. They're dying. This lack of sympathy. Again, it goes back to that punishment, which I said in the first episode. That is still our number one approach, even in treatment centers. We're going to punish this guy because he did wrong and he needs to pay the price. Well, it's not working, folks. So, again, to finish up on the question, just go slow, talk to your sponsor, get everybody on board, work out a plan, not alone, but with your sponsor, and then follow the plan, and you'll come out just fine. I can promise you that. We're not in charge. We let higher power be in charge. We let our sponsors and supports be in charge, and then we come out just fine. That's worked for me in every area of my life ever since I've been in this deal. All right. Great questions. Great feedback, Dan. Good stuff. We might actually have Dan the Man on camera very soon here, so everybody look forward to that. You'll get to see his lovely mug on there. Ladies, back up and beware. Giving you fair warning. Everybody wants a little piece of Dan the Man. All right. Just joking here. So I hope that was helpful. Come back and see us and like and subscribe, as we say, every week. We're going to work on these topics to get started around addiction, but I'm going to start throwing some curveballs in. So like I said, next time, which will be in a few weeks, we're going to do all this God stuff about how we've all been sold a bill of goods and had our God stolen from us and our relationship with this power. And that's just not addicts and alcoholics. That's everybody. So, and we'll be getting into a lot of topics. I can't wait down the road. We'll talk about cell phone addiction, game addiction, gambling, food addiction, and all the other stuff that's going on in our society. So stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting time. All right, in group, we always like to stop with the final serenity prayer, which they say in meetings all over the world. So if you'd like to join us, feel free to. All right. Our fire. Sorry.
Pretty close. And we do that all
we do that one over the world too.
Yep.
But that sketches people out. So let's keep it simple. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Just for today. Keep coming back. Your works if you're working, you die if you don't. We love y'all. Please come back to see us. Thank you so much.